So you are about to drop a new album, Always Only Jesus. Tell us about that title.
Well, the whole thing kind of originally started for our last album, Inhale Exhale, which we did during the pandemic. We wrote about 30 or 40 songs, had a lot left over, and when we completed that album, we didn't know what we were going to do with the remaining songs, and there was one in particular called "Then Christ Came" that we knew we wanted whatever was going to be next. We knew it wanted to be the lead single. So when we finally got that one right, we thought we were going to just put it out there. The last album kind of ran its course, and we were going to do like a little 5-song EP around it because, man, we lost all track of time with the pandemic. It feels like we just released that album and we're released this like a week later, but it's been almost 18 months. And so what became a 5-song EP, just we kept adding songs. We couldn't stop, and it became a full album. And kind of what we saw, man, through the pandemic and coming out of that, I don't know if I've ever seen the body of Christ more divided than it has been lately.
Yeah. It's sad.
Yeah. And we talked about it like coming right out of all that. And when we started touring again, but even from this would have been the fall of last year to now, it's like now what we've been seeing, because we've been off all summer and working on the record, being home. And, we had dear friends, like small groups we were a part of. And surprisingly, people drew lines and really started to fight for whatever they thought was right. And it was almost shocking. And it was kind of the perfect storm, political, pandemic, everything. And there was like, wow, I didn't see this side of them. And then now that we're kind of going back to normal, you see either people kind of backing that up a little bit or pretending it didn't happen or trying to explain where they stand. And I wasn't sure if there's much healing in that. And so while making this record, all the songs were deliberately like, it wasn't about clever lyrics or whatever. It was just, deliberately towards Jesus and about Jesus. And I was like, man, this is the perfect time, because if we've ever needed a common denominator to agree on, it has to be Jesus. Because, man, I can disagree with you on things if you truly believe what you're doing is pursuing the heart of God. And, I grew up Baptist. We have Methodist next door. It works out. but it's like, yeah, but as long as we're pursuing Jesus, as long as he's at the core of it. And so I thought, if there's ever time to try to unify the body for us to kind of do our part, it's to sing about Jesus. And so unintentionally, we looked at this album from beginning to end and was like, man, it is all pointing one direction. There's no way to misunderstand what this is about. And then so we ended up writing a song actually called Always Only Jesus kind of near the end, because it was like, it wasn't because we wanted to be a title. It's like this, if we're going to we want to do like a legit like corporate worship song, but man, we want it to be like this Braveheart moment, like just powerful, just powerful song. And by the time we were finished with it, we're like, this is the best title for the record. This sums it up. Even the artwork is plain and simple, just a silhouette of the band and the title, and that's it. And because we wanted it to just be all about him, and just what started out as like, let's finish out these songs, became what I think, because of the timing of everything, the most important record we've ever done.
Wow. So, and you've done, this is your 11th. So that's a big statement to say this is the most important. And honestly, everything you just talked about, I've been thinking a lot about, right? All of the division, all the chaos, all the fighting. It's great to have different opinions, but if our opinions and our views are causing discord and we're not putting Christ at the center of it, which
Right.
I know for myself, I can't speak for anybody else, but for me, quite often, many times, I've started to put either a political idea or a party or some thought that I have or feeling maybe ahead of the gospel and what we're called to do. And so what a great album to kind of put out at this time. And you said it really well, that people are kind of picking up those pieces, pretending it didn't happen, and trying to move forward. But we've got to reflect on that, right? So that we maybe don't behave that way next time.
100%. Like we kind of had, a lot of people had this kind of battle cry, like they were ready for a fight. And what's crazy, you have all of these different movements and these different things people are standing for, that just some of them seem crazy and just out there. But I believe with all my heart, the craziest movement to be a part of is grace and forgiveness right now, is what it feels like. And that's, I think there's people in the church who would think that's the most preposterous thing to do right now. And I'm like, man, if we ever needed to forgive and have grace and show mercy to people, especially our brothers and sisters in Christ, it's now, and it's hard, but yeah, I mean, yeah, there's just a lot of healing, and I believe with all of my heart that like I genuinely believe we're just on the outskirts of something amazing. I really believe that, because the pendulum always swings, and I'm like, man, I just hope just that people desire what Jesus has, and a truth that's unwavering. And so
Yeah.
we'll see, man.
Well, it's amazing you said that too, because I think, as a journalist and as somebody who covers a lot of stories, the stories that resonate, they shock people, right? And this is kind of sad in some ways, but
Right.
also encouraging. Like the kid who hugged the police officer who shot his brother. I don't know if you remember that story a
Yeah.
couple of years ago. That viral moment of this hug and this forgiveness in the courtroom, that shocks people. And I think it shocks people because they're like, what is inside of that guy that made him, instead of cursing her out or yelling at her, go over, forgive her, and hug her? And that's Jesus. I mean, that's the Holy Spirit, right? So that, to me, that's the most radical thing that we can do, is to forgive and to love others, because it makes people on the outside of faith say, wow, maybe there's something to that.
Yeah, I have 5 kids, and one of my teenage kids, I overheard him saying the other day, because he was on, TikTok or some social media or something like that. And I heard him say, man, the craziest thing, the only things that go viral is something incredibly violent, or something that is so graceful and loving and forgiving. And he's right, man. The world's such in a weird place that if I'm flipping through Instagram and I see, the child hugging the police, I will cry like I just watched The
Yep.
Notebook for the 47th time. Like it could be 10 seconds long, but it is. We're starving for it, and
Yeah.
I think that's, I just think something amazing is going to happen.
Well, I love that. And I got to ask you, because you mentioned this, and I think last time we talked, you mentioned it as well, that, an album has what, 10, 14 songs, whatever. It's a small number, but you
Right.
recorded all of these other songs. Is that a common practice, when you're putting an album together, that you might have 30 to 50 songs that you have to choose from?
For some, it might be. It never has been for us. One, because I'm lazy, and two, I don't. Honestly, I don't enjoy writing lyrics, because for me, like, I lament. I've learned that I lament well, which means I've got to go to a painful place to get something that's meaningful for me. I love the results, but it's like, I guess it'd be like working out. No one wants to get up and go, "Let me just do this," and so I have to go to a place. It's very therapeutic, but I never just go skipping in with a smile on my face, like, here we go. Like, I put it off, and so for years, if we needed 13 songs, we might write 14. And what I mean by that is that we agree early on if it's worth finishing. We may have a ton of ideas, but because of the pandemic, we had almost finished our last album, and then then the pandemic hit, so we weren't going to release it if we weren't touring, and so we ended up writing another 30 or 40 songs. We just bought this cabin, the studio, and we just fixed it up, and so when it was safe, this became our refuge, and we just made music all the time. So that's never happened before. And it is weird, because as a writer, each song feels like it's your child. And it's like, okay, which kids are getting kicked off the album when you have that many? And it's a hard decision. And so we were sitting on all these, and we still, like, we went through different plans of what do we do with these leftover songs. We've never had this. And even with this new album, probably 4 or 5 are from the first batch. And then we ended up still writing. So we wrote 5 new ones for it too. So I don't know. I don't know. I mean, sometimes you find a home with another artist that's looking, but I've never been in this situation. So, but sometimes it
Yeah.
feels like you're treating it like manna. If you hold on to it too long, it's not gonna. You'll get tired of it, or you'll move on. And so we're trying to figure it out.
Well, I mean, you guys have been, trying to figure it out. You've been figuring it out for a long time. You've been around 3 decades almost, right? Doing music, which
Yep.
is incredible, because I think when you look at, and I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to you, I really mean it. When you look at Christian bands and Christian artists, you guys are incredibly unique for a variety of reasons. You've had things happen in your career that don't happen to people ever. Not only have you had, a film obviously be made about your life and what you've gone through, and I can only imagine, but you guys have seen a song that you've already kind of moved on from become sort of this timeless hit. And we've talked about these things in the past. It's so interesting to me looking at that history. The other thing, a lot of bands don't make it, 10 years, let alone as long as you have. What keeps you going and the band going?
We're trying to avoid hard labor at all costs, is what we always say. But man, I think one, we still like, these guys are genuinely my best friends. Like, we love being around each other still. We get along so well. And it's funny because somebody wrote a comment on some like Apple Music or something with a new album, and they wrote, "Wow, Mercy Me still making music. That's amazing!" Like, and we kept looking at her like, "Wait a minute, are we the old? We're the old guys in the room now. Like it's we still feel like we're 12-year-olds that are still trying to be in a band." And I think that's part of it too. We genuinely love what we're doing, and sometimes the label's like, "Hey, man, maybe you should have more of a presence in social media or whatever." And we just like to make music, and we were like, I don't know if we'll ever quit. We'll probably just do less shows, but I think we'll always be making music at some point. And I don't know what the secret is. I thought, we would, it feels like about every 10 years we're like, okay, it's time to ride off in the sunset. No one cares, and then we get another chance. And so we genuinely love what we're doing still.
Yeah, and you guys are, I mean, you're really humble people. And I think that's interesting because, yes, you perform in Christian music, yes, but the reality is the level of notoriety that you guys have, you've been around for a long time. It's often hard for people to maintain that humility because they sometimes take their eyes off of what we were talking about earlier, which is Christ, that centerpiece. What is it that has enabled you all, and maybe you all help each other with this too, but to remain such humble, kind people throughout all of this?
Well, I appreciate that, but it would be that I'm in a band. I don't know how solo acts do it when you're surrounded by people that you pay to be around you, and man, being the same five guys for we've been together for 28 years, probably at least 25 of them that's been the same guys. It's you don't stand a chance. Like if anybody does anything that seems kind of arrogant, man, you're knocked down four times over, and yeah, and it's just and because we've been through so much, yeah, it's call it accountability or whatever. It's just we've been in this journey together, and so there's no surprises, and we all know what it was like before and what it's now, and it's been awesome. The one time that comes to mind is when Imagine blew up the first time, like in 2002 or whatever, and went to mainstream. It was crazy, and it was like there's some things I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. To where we were doing about 250 shows a year, and we were like doing like First Baptist so and so here, and then flying to Jay Leno the next day, and it was very like bipolar is what it felt like, just all the places we're going. Part of it was fun, but part of it was like a beat down, and I remember afterwards going, man, we didn't have a second to even stop to try and enjoy that, like what just happened. When the movie happened, man, every guy in the band was like, slow down, like this is not supposed to happen, one, and try to enjoy this, and find time to talk to people, and it was cool to kind of get another chance at something really random and weird, and this time around be like, man, we have kids that are old enough to understand it, and just it was a really fun journey. And but I think the only way that we're ever remotely able to stay humble is because of each other and our families and just sticking together that long.
Yeah. Well, and I love that. And I think really in like music history, I can only imagine is hands down one of the most amazing and bizarre things to happen. Not the song itself, but the things around it. And
I agree.
it really is. I mean, I've covered a lot of this stuff, and there's not a lot of stories like it. And even every time you think it's sort of done, right? Like, okay, it's run its course, it's done now. You then had the film, right, a couple of years back. And you just mentioned that, and you mentioned the humility aspect. How did the movie, because everything you had done, obviously, up to that point, music, then you're taking that, you're putting it into a film, and now you've had a couple of years to reflect on that and see the impact of that. How did the movie change things for you?
Um, Man, it's the movie was it was a challenge. It was interesting. It was, man, it was like 8 years in the making. It wasn't my idea. Someone approached us 8 years before it ever released and said they wanted to make a movie about who they were asking people what's the biggest song, and at the time, this tell you how far back it was either Imagine or Shout to the Lord. And they talked to them first, so I don't know what happened there, but they came to us and said, hey, we'll make this movie. We didn't believe them, and so when it finally happened, um, it was interesting because no one can prepare you to having your life story put on a screen for everybody to see. It's one thing for me to talk about it on stage and be kind of in control of it, if you will, and say what I want to say or whatever. But that was it was incredibly emotional. It was after reading the script, watching edits, watching them film everything, to be in a room was frightening, like terrifying, because I never thought of, like, where you're like, are they laughing? Are they crying? Are they, anyway, but all that to go through that, and to come out, and my head was so deep into it that what was weird is the ministry aspect never crossed my mind, because I was more worried about, are they making a good film, a bad film? Why would they tell my story at all? Like, you're worried about all this other stuff. And then the first time it showed, and I was there, we left the room, and these certain people wouldn't leave the theater, and the ushers had to come in like, hey, we got to switch. And the guy was like, hold on, I'm trying to get my dad on the phone. I've got to work things out. Like, as soon as the movie was over, like in tears. And I got so many, especially men and sons, trying to reconcile, or either they're the father in that movie or trying to reconcile with their father. And it never crossed my mind. And so at that point I was like, oh man, like, I mean, I was more grateful than anything, because it is hard to tell that story, and you worry about if you get it right or whatever, or if it matters. And then to see the amount of people that have kind of reached out still to this day, we get a ton of people reaching out saying, man, this movie rekindled a relationship with my son or my father or whatever it might
Wow.
be. And so that was man, I selfishly, I say that was a gift from God, because I really had lost sight of that just in the whole watching them make it. And now I'm like, okay, like you can almost exhale going, it was absolutely worth it. And
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I remember thinking back to when you were doing it and thinking, gosh, that's got to be hard, because you have relatives, you have people who are going to be affected by it because it's a story that involves them, or they're on the periphery of it. And
right.
that's a really hard part of it. And so how else would you process that other than, this is my story, how's it going to work out? And then that amazing payoff of realizing, wow, by sharing this, I helped so many other people. That's a really incredible gift. It really is.
Yeah, it really is. And it's like, and anything less than that might have been tough. And it was tough on my family, because, I had to, we had to do a couple of rewrites, because I just thought, it is true what happened, but it's going to just devastate my mom. And even though, and my brother, who's 5 years older, so he wasn't actually in the movie, because most of the story happens once he's moved out. And so they were like, it's hard to introduce a character and then him leave immediately.
Yeah.
And so, and he understood it, but they were all for it. I wasn't going to do the movie, and they talked me into it, like, who gets this chance? I'm like, I don't think you understand, like, where this is going to go. And
Right.
sitting with my mom and watching it and thinking it's going to kill her, she was in tears and said, I hate that it was that way, but that's pretty right. And then she goes, but I'm so proud of the man you've become and where we are. And so she was supportive. My brother, who was all for it, and I thought, he's on my side here. It's my mom's kind of issue. He struggled. Like, I learned a lot as with us both being adults, of like, we both thought my dad was an amazing person, but my story is that my dad was an awful guy, and Jesus changed him. My brother would say, Jesus or no Jesus, he was always awesome. That's just how things were done back then, if you got out of line. And so, even though it was more of a challenge with us, I can honestly say we're in a healthier place now more than ever, because we used to just talk about the Dallas Cowboys and nothing
Right.
else. And now
Yeah.
that we're actually, addressing wounds and stuff like that, we've talked more now than we ever have. And so it's still challenging at times, but actually we're in a great place now. It's been taking a few years, but it took a little bit.
Yeah, and like family is always challenging, even when it's amazing. And when you have a story like that, it's a tough thing to navigate. But you did it beautifully. You inspired so many lives, and now you're doing that again with Always Only Jesus. It hits October 21st. As always, thanks for your time today.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.